The assembly hall buzzed with anticipation as alien delegates from across the galaxy gathered to discuss the next phase of their empire's expansion. Hushed voices, murmurs of excitement, and the occasional flare of ego filled the room, creating a palpable sense of expectation. Each delegate, from worlds known for military prowess, scientific advancement, or resource wealth, represented a faction united in their ambition, expansion, conquest, and control. Today's agenda: Earth, a small planet at the edge of their maps, rich in minerals, water, and life forms. For most delegates, Earth was a symbol of easy conquest, a promising addition to their growing empire, offering resources without significant risk. The proposing delegate, tall and confident, stepped forward to address the assembly. He was known for his ambition and persuasive charm, traits that had earned him both allies and rivals. He launched into his speech with fervor, painting an appealing vision of Earth's potential. "This world is brimming with untapped resources," he declared, a glint of hunger in his gaze. "Minerals, fossil fuels, fresh water, and biological diversity beyond measure. The native inhabitants, though clever in their own way, are primitive by our standards. Their technology is laughable. Their ambitions, limited to the confines of their small solar system, lack true vision." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. Around him, approving nods and murmurs of agreement reassured him that his proposal was resonating. "Imagine," he continued, "a planet where the inhabitants remain blissfully unaware of the greater galaxy, content in their ignorance. They are contained within their atmosphere, barely capable of reaching their own moon, let alone posing any real threat to us. Earth is ripe for the taking. It's practically a gift, waiting to be plucked." For most in the room, his words echoed their own thoughts, their own assumptions. Earth was, after all, just another planet, another target. The Empire's reach had spread across countless worlds, and each conquest had followed a familiar pattern: land, overwhelm, extract resources, and impose control. The assembly members had seen it all before, and Earth seemed no different. But not everyone was swept up in the wave of enthusiasm. As the proposing delegate's words lingered, a ripple of hesitation surfaced. A handful of delegates exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions clouded with doubt. One of these was the skeptical delegate, an old, seasoned observer with a reputation for caution. He had seen the aftermath of rushed conquests, had studied the complexities of subjugated worlds and learned, often painfully, that assumptions were dangerous. With deliberate slowness, he raised his voice, quiet yet resonant enough to silence the room's murmurs. "Are we certain about this?" he asked, his gaze steady as he scanned the room. His question hung in the air, unsettling the certainty that had filled the assembly moments before. There was something about his tone, a caution, a weight, that demanded attention. He was not one to speak lightly, and the others knew it. His reputation for insight, though sometimes unwelcome, was respected. The proposing delegate's confident expression flickered briefly. "What do you mean, are we certain?" "Earth is primitive. They pose no threat," he replied, his tone a mix of irritation and dismissal. He was not accustomed to being questioned, least of all by someone whose reputation for caution often slowed progress. The skeptical delegate tilted his head slightly, as though considering how to articulate a complex thought. "Primitive, perhaps," he acknowledged, "but there is more to them than meets the eye. I've studied them. Their history, their nature. They are unlike the others we've encountered." His words stirred a fresh wave of curiosity among the assembly members. Some leaned forward, intrigued despite themselves. The skeptical delegate's words carried an undertone that hinted at something more, a hidden depth to Earth's inhabitants that had gone unnoticed by most. The proposing delegate, trying to retain control of the narrative, forced a dismissive chuckle. "They are bound by their own limitations. Their wars are fought with crude technology, their ambitions limited to their own sphere. What could they possibly offer in resistance?" The skeptical delegate's gaze sharpened. "And yet, despite their limitations, they have a history of resilience and adaptation. When cornered, they do not surrender easily. They persist. They are tenacious in a way we may not fully understand. An uneasy silence fell over the assembly as his words settled in. The skeptical delegate continued, his voice calm but weighted with conviction. Their world has shaped them. Despite facing natural disasters, pandemics, and conflicts, they rebuild. Again and again. They evolve, learn, and grow stronger. They possess a unique quality, an unpredictable ingenuity. We might be misinterpreting their simplicity as weakness. A few delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, as though his words had cast a shadow over their assumptions. The proposing delegate tried to regain his footing. Even if they have resilience, it is not enough to stand against our fleets, our technology, our forces, he argued. They will fold, as all the others have. The skeptical delegate's expression remained impassive, but his voice carried a warning. Perhaps. Or perhaps they will surprise us. There are accounts of them turning adversity into strength, of uniting in times of crisis with a tenacity that defies logic. Their wars have been brutal, yes, but they have also forced them to innovate, to adapt in ways we cannot predict. He paused, then added, Our own history shows that assumptions can lead to costly mistakes. Earth may look easy to conquer, but underestimating them could be our greatest error. The room fell silent, a mix of skepticism and contemplation in the delegate's expressions. The proposing delegate's confidence had been shaken, though he was not willing to admit it. Still, he sensed the growing uncertainty and sought to quell it. So what do you suggest? He asked, an edge to his voice. The skeptical delegate regarded him evenly. I suggest caution. A closer study. We have the resources to observe them more closely, to learn their strengths and weaknesses. An invasion is irreversible. Once we engage, there is no turning back. But if we take the time to understand them, we may avoid a misstep that could cost us far more than we imagine. The proposing delegate narrowed his eyes but said nothing. Around him, a subtle shift had taken place. The certainty, the eagerness, had faded, replaced by an uncomfortable awareness of the unknown. Earth, once perceived as a simple conquest, now loomed in their minds as something mysterious, perhaps even dangerous. After a pause, the proposing delegate forced a nod. Very well, he conceded, though reluctance laced his tone. We will consider further observation. But remember, he added, his gaze steely, time waits for no empire. We cannot afford hesitation. The skeptical delegate inclined his head slightly, his expression unreadable. But as the assembly began to disperse, each delegate lost in thought. The sense of unease lingered, like a shadow they could not shake. Somewhere, deep within that unease, lay the first glimmer of respect, a reluctant acknowledgement that Earth, and its inhabitants, might be far more formidable than they had dared to imagine. After the assembly adjourned, a select group of delegates convened in a secluded chamber, away from the enthusiastic throngs that had so readily embraced the plan to conquer Earth. They were senior members, veterans of conquests that had spanned galaxies, and they valued caution as much as ambition. The skeptical delegate took his place among them, his expression calm yet intent, ready to explain his reservations in depth. His reputation for insight was well known, even if his cautious nature often seemed at odds with the Empire's expansionist zeal. The others waited in silence as he began, laying out data that had taken decades to compile. Earth may look like an isolated, primitive world, he stated, voice steady. But there's a pattern of resilience here that we can't ignore. He gestured to a projection, a catalogue of human history, wars, disasters, and recoveries spanning millennia. Unlike most other species we've encountered, humans have a peculiar relationship with conflict and hardship. Instead of fracturing under pressure, they adapt. It's in their nature to push forward, no matter the cost. One of the senior delegates raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. Adaptation is a universal trait. Every species evolves under pressure. What makes Earth's inhabitants different? Adaptation, yes, the skeptical delegate replied. But this is more than simple evolution. It's their reaction to adversity. While others avoid risk, humans run toward it. They embrace challenges that seem insurmountable. When confronted by obstacles, they innovate, adapt their tactics, and more importantly, they refuse to yield. This mindset has created a level of unpredictability that even we may not be prepared to counter. He paused, allowing the impact of his words to sink in. The delegates watched as he pulled up case after case, historic records of Earth's greatest conflicts, from their early tribal wars to global-scale conflicts that had nearly destroyed their civilization. In each instance, the humans had emerged stronger, wielding every crisis as an opportunity to grow. Here, he continued, pointing to the records, during a catastrophic war, they advanced their technologies at an exponential rate, achieving milestones that, by all logic, should have taken centuries. It's as if they thrive on chaos. A delegate known for his strategic acumen folded his arms, his expression contemplative. Are you saying they pose a threat simply because they're resilient? That alone doesn't make them unconquerable. Resilience can be worn down. The skeptical delegate gave a slow nod, acknowledging the point. True. But resilience isn't their only weapon. They possess something more, a unity born out of necessity. When faced with common threats, they set aside differences and come together with a level of cooperation that rivals our own alliances. For them, survival becomes a singular objective. This unity, combined with their adaptability, creates a force that isn't easily dismantled. When we invade, we won't just face isolated groups, we'll face an entire world acting as one. There was a pause, a shift in the room's atmosphere as each delegate considered the implications. The skeptical delegate continued, drawing on more records, describing humanity's ability to not only withstand threats but to turn adversity into an opportunity for advancement. Consider this, he said. They've managed to harness the very elements that have threatened them, harnessing fire, taming nature, developing technology that pushes the boundaries of their understanding. They've mastered environments others would deem hostile. Ice, heat, scarcity, they adapt to all. The military advisor, a delegate who had orchestrated campaigns against worlds with formidable defenses, leaned forward, intrigued but unconvinced. Let's say they're resilient and adaptive. That's impressive, but we have technology that surpasses anything they could field. One strike from our fleets, and they'll be in disarray before they even know what hit them. The skeptical delegate's gaze was unwavering. And that, precisely, is the mistake we must avoid. Their histories are filled with examples of overcoming technologically superior foes through sheer creativity and determination. When cornered, they fight with every resource available, including methods we might consider primitive or unorthodox. Their capacity for rapid, unconventional strategy cannot be underestimated. He elaborated, recounting instances where human forces, though vastly outmatched, had managed to overcome by exploiting the weaknesses of their opponents, by using terrain, tactics, and even psychological strategies that were as brilliant as they were ruthless. They understand the art of asymmetric warfare better than most species we've encountered. They know how to turn disadvantage into advantage. They don't need the most advanced weapons. They need only a moment, a small gap in our strategy, and they'll exploit it without hesitation. One of the delegates, now visibly intrigued, remarked, "You're saying we might face not just an army but a collective mind, a population capable of innovation under pressure." Precisely. The skeptical delegate confirmed, a rare urgency in his tone. Once united, they're relentless. During times of crisis, they become unpredictable, willing to sacrifice themselves for their kin, for their beliefs. This sense of duty, of unity, is something we seldom see in species outside our own. We are dealing with a people who value their freedom above all else. That makes them dangerous in ways we haven't accounted for. A hush settled over the room, the air thick with a growing unease. Some of the delegates had seen this before, on worlds that had initially appeared easy to conquer, only to surprise them with unexpected resistance. The skeptical delegate's words were weaving a picture of Earth's inhabitants as not merely resilient but formidable, capable of turning even their weaknesses into strengths. Sensing the shift in their attitudes, the skeptical delegate continued. When faced with overwhelming odds, they don't surrender. They regroup, they adapt, they strike back with whatever they can muster. This isn't just a hypothetical scenario, it's well documented. Their history is a testament to their spirit. Invading Earth isn't simply a matter of force, It's a test of endurance, ingenuity, and willpower. They are, perhaps, the most relentless species we could encounter. There was a moment of silence before a senior delegate, who had thus far remained silent, finally spoke, voice low and reflective. If what you say is true, we might face an adversary who will not only resist but continue to evolve in response to our invasion. And if they manage to adapt to our methods... The thought lingered, heavy and unsettling. The skeptical delegate nodded gravely. Yes. There's a real possibility that, by invading Earth, we could catalyze their evolution, accelerating their capabilities at a rate we cannot control. In seeking to conquer them, we might inadvertently forge them into something even stronger. This is why I urge caution. A ripple of agreement moved through the room, tempered by the weight of his words. The delegates, who had initially dismissed his concerns, now viewed the conquest of Earth with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. What had seemed like an easy target was now shrouded in mystery, a potential threat hiding behind a veil of perceived simplicity. Finally, the military advisor, whose skepticism had been worn down by the skeptical delegate's compelling evidence, spoke up, his voice measured. Perhaps a thorough reconnaissance is in order. We need to understand them fully before taking action. If what you say is true, we must be prepared for a response unlike any we've seen. The skeptical delegate inclined his head, accepting the tentative shift in their stance. Exactly. Observation first, then action. The humans are a force unlike any we've encountered, not because of their technology but because of their spirit, their relentless drive. Underestimating them could lead us into a costly war. The chamber fell silent as each delegate weighed the implications, their previous confidence now tempered with a profound respect for the unknown potential of humanity. Earth, once seen as a simple conquest, had transformed in their minds into a challenge, a risk. The skeptical delegate had succeeded in reshaping their perspective, but even he knew that only time would reveal if his caution had been enough to prepare them for the true nature of Earth's inhabitants. The assembly reconvened in the grandeur of the main hall, a collective decision teetering between caution and ambition. After much debate, the decision to proceed with an invasion was ultimately approved, though with a slight nod toward caution. They would begin with a limited strike force, meant to test Earth's defenses and responses, minimizing risk and collecting valuable intelligence. It was a compromise, enough force to overwhelm, but restrained enough to allow for recalibration should the unexpected arise. The proposing delegate's confidence, though slightly dampened by the skeptical delegate's warnings, surged as the plan was finalized. He was eager to prove that the conquest of Earth would proceed as smoothly as any other. The fleet assembled, a gleaming armada that had long carried the Empire's banner across countless star systems. Each ship bore advanced weaponry and shielding, capable of decimating whole cities in seconds. They would descend upon Earth's atmosphere with speed, projecting a show of force that would serve as both intimidation and deterrent. For the aliens, it was a display of their might, a signal that resistance would be futile. The skeptical delegate joined the fleet, though reluctantly, acting as both observer and advisor. If there was anything unpredictable about Earth, he wanted to witness it firsthand. As the fleet entered Earth's orbit, the first phase of the plan went smoothly. Initial scans revealed clusters of human defense structures, satellites, and stations circling the planet in protective orbits. The proposing delegate sneered, dismissing them as outdated and barely functional. He ordered a targeted strike on the satellites, expecting them to crumble with minimal resistance. A simple display of power to assert dominance before moving forward with the invasion. But almost immediately, things did not go as planned. Moments after the first satellites were neutralized, a series of unexpected signals erupted across Earth's communication networks. Within minutes, coordinated efforts from multiple nations began rerouting data and transmitting encrypted commands. In a display of swift adaptation, Earth's defense systems reoriented, activating backup protocols and rerouting vital information through untraceable channels. The proposing delegate's confidence faltered as he realized that, despite their technological limitations, Earth's inhabitants were coordinating faster and more effectively than anticipated. Human forces mobilized with remarkable speed. Military bases across continents went into high alert, launching ground-to-air defense systems capable of reaching the alien ships in low orbit. Civilian communication networks were repurposed, allowing governments to broadcast coordinated instructions to their populations. Humanity was rallying, not as isolated nations, but as a united front. The proposing delegate issued commands to intensify the attack, ordering targeted strikes on key infrastructure. Power grids, military bases, communication hubs. Each target was chosen with precision, aimed at dismantling Earth's coordination. Yet, as each wave of attacks disrupted one system, another backup emerged, like a hydra regrowing its heads. The skeptical delegate observed with a grim satisfaction, seeing firsthand what he had warned about: humanity's capacity for rapid adaptation. It was as if Earth's inhabitants were anticipating each move, reacting with a resilience and ingenuity that seemed almost instinctual. Human forces, vastly outgunned and technologically outmatched, nonetheless proved formidable. Fighter jets, ground troops, and improvised defenses sprang into action, coordinating across regions with a unity the aliens had not foreseen. In one instance, a squadron of jets, acting on information shared through encrypted civilian channels, managed to disrupt an entire line of alien drones, forcing them to recalibrate and wasting precious minutes in the process. The alien command was baffled, their advanced technology suddenly meeting an opposition that refused to fold. As the conflict unfolded, Earth's response evolved. Humans repurposed their existing technology with surprising ingenuity, transforming civilian infrastructure into defense tools. In urban areas, they used buildings and natural landscapes as shields, obscuring alien targeting systems and drawing the alien forces into ambush zones. In rural areas, civilians took to guerrilla tactics, using local knowledge to stage attacks on alien reconnaissance teams. Farmers transformed old equipment into makeshift weaponry, engineers coordinated from basements, and entire communities became hubs of resistance. The aliens were witnessing not just a military defense but a societal response. The proposing delegate, frustrated and humiliated by the unanticipated resistance, demanded an all-out strike, but the skeptical delegate intervened, advising caution. "This is what I warned about," he reminded, a mix of concern and vindication in his voice. "They are unpredictable, resilient. If we escalate, they will escalate in ways we cannot foresee. Their strength lies in adaptation. We must adjust our strategy before we're drawn into their game." But the proposing delegate's pride was at stake. He viewed humanity's resilience as nothing more than an inconvenience, a minor irritation to be snuffed out by sheer force. Ignoring the warning, he ordered a heavy bombardment on major cities, confident that a decisive show of power would break Earth's will. What he failed to realize was that this escalation would only intensify human resistance. The bombardments began, unleashing destruction upon urban centers. The alien ships targeted landmarks, communications towers, transportation hubs, anything that could disrupt Earth's infrastructure. Yet, instead of breaking their spirit, the strikes galvanized humanity. Leaders, officials, and civilians alike broadcast messages of defiance, urging each other to stand firm. Underground networks sprang into action, repurposing radio waves, satellite dishes, and even ancient wired networks to maintain communication. They refused to let the alien forces sever their connections. Across the planet, the human response grew fiercer. Medical teams worked tirelessly in makeshift hospitals, treating casualties and reinforcing morale. Engineers and hackers collaborated, infiltrating alien signals to gather intel, to understand their enemies' tactics and patterns. The bombardments, meant to subdue, became fuel for Earth's relentless pushback. The skeptical delegate watched in awe as humanity turned desperation into innovation, fear into unyielding defiance. As night fell over Earth, the alien fleet found itself in a tactical nightmare. Their superior technology was of little use against an enemy that refused to fight by predictable rules. The humans' guerrilla tactics, their improvisation, their willingness to sacrifice for each other, all were factors the alien command had failed to account for. Every strike against Earth only seemed to strengthen its resolve, forcing the alien forces to reassess their strategy with each passing hour. Finally, The proposing delegate, now exhausted and visibly shaken, turned to the skeptical delegate, frustration etched across his features. What are these creatures?" he asked, almost in disbelief. "They are supposed to be primitive, inferior. And yet they fight like they have nothing to lose." The skeptical delegate, though disturbed by the devastation, spoke with a calm certainty. "This is what I warned you about. You have mistaken their isolation for weakness, their primitive technology for lack of spirit. But these beings, these humans, they do not fight for conquest or gain. They fight for each other, for their home. It is a kind of strength we cannot break with force alone." Realizing the truth of his words, the proposing delegate's confidence crumbled. He had underestimated Earth, its people, their unity, and the strength born from defending what they loved. The fleet's resources were depleting, and morale was wearing thin. Each moment spent on Earth's invasion drained them, as human forces continued to fight back with an intensity that refused to diminish. In one last desperate attempt to regain control, the proposing delegate called for reinforcements, but the message that came back from the assembly was clear: retreat and regroup. Earth was no longer seen as a mere conquest but as a proving ground that had humbled the Empire. The aliens, realizing they could not defeat a species as unpredictable and relentless as humanity, began their reluctant withdrawal. The skeptical delegate watched as the ships turned back, Earth's lights twinkling in the darkness below. He felt a quiet respect for the planet and its inhabitants, a people who had not only survived but defied the might of an empire. As the fleet retreated, he knew that Earth would forever be marked as a world too resilient to conquer, a place where even the strongest would think twice before daring to invade again. As the alien fleet retreated, Earth's defenders watched from below, battered but unbroken. Across the planet, humanity's response transformed from defense to resilience. The people were not celebrating a victory, but honoring a collective strength that had sustained them through the alien onslaught. In every city, town, and village, people emerged from shelters, scarred but resolute, united in ways they had never imagined possible. For Earth, this was more than a survival story. It was a defining moment that revealed their capacity for unity and the indomitable spirit that had carried them through every crisis in their history. On the alien command vessel, the skeptical delegate observed Earth's surface, contemplating the implications of what they had just experienced. What had started as a conquest had turned into a forced retreat, a bitter acknowledgement that Earth's inhabitants were unlike any other species they had encountered. The proposing delegate, once brimming with confidence, now stood in sullen silence. He knew his reputation had suffered a devastating blow, his ambitions shattered by a species he had deemed inferior. Breaking the silence, the proposing delegate spoke, his voice a strained mixture of disbelief and frustration. "I don't understand. They shouldn't have been able to stand against us. They had nothing but outdated weapons, no advanced technology, no unifying government. By all logic, they should have crumbled under the first assault." The skeptical delegate replied calmly, his tone edged with a quiet wisdom. "It is precisely because of those limitations that they endured. Their strength lies not in their technology, but in their adaptability, their unity in the face of overwhelming odds. We misjudge them by assessing only their physical capabilities, overlooking the depth of their determination and creativity." He elaborated, pointing out that humanity's resilience was not simply a result of their desperation but a byproduct of a culture that valued survival, sacrifice, and collective strength. While other species had developed predictable responses to conquest, Earth's people operated on a fundamentally different wavelength, refusing to surrender no matter the cost. Their connection to their world, their willingness to stand by each other, had been more formidable than any weapon the aliens could deploy. The proposing delegate shook his head, unwilling to let go of his pride. "But they're still confined to their own planet. They have no spacefaring technology, no ability to retaliate on a galactic scale. We could return with double our forces, crush their defenses once and for all." The skeptical delegate's gaze hardened. "And risk creating an even fiercer opponent? Each strike only strengthens their resolve, each setback fuels their determination. Returning would mean not just facing their defenses again but confronting a species that now understands us. Earth's inhabitants learn quickly. If we push them further, they will adapt, and they will become stronger than they are now. Every act of aggression will push them to evolve in ways we can't anticipate. The proposing delegate fell silent, the weight of these words settling heavily on him. He had witnessed the ingenuity of Earth's people firsthand, their ability to turn even the simplest of resources into effective tools of resistance. Their response had been far more than a mere defense. It was a calculated series of maneuvers that had utilized every aspect of their environment. They had fought not as a traditional army but as a living organism, each individual playing a role that collectively overwhelmed and outmaneuvered an advanced alien force. In the days following the retreat, the assembly convened once more, this time with an air of humility. Reports from the failed invasion had reached every corner of their empire, and the high-ranking officials who had initially backed the conquest now wore expressions of uncertainty. Earth, once viewed as a simple target, had become a cautionary tale. Delegates who had previously supported the invasion now questioned whether they had overlooked something crucial, whether their empire's drive for expansion had blinded them to the dangers of underestimating their opponents. The skeptical delegate addressed the assembly, detailing the lessons they had learned from Earth's defense. We assumed that technology alone would ensure victory, that our superiority in resources and firepower would bring compliance. But the inhabitants of Earth have reminded us that strength is not solely measured in weapons or fleets. True power lies in resilience, in the unyielding will to protect one's home and kin. In this, they surpassed even our most disciplined forces. He cautioned against any further attempts to subjugate Earth, warning that any future invasions would likely face an even stronger opposition. Earth's people had proven that they were capable of rapid adaptation. Another conflict would only serve to accelerate their development, possibly even creating a future threat rather than a subdued world. If we persist in viewing them as primitive, he concluded, we will only be sowing the seeds of our own failure. Earth has earned our respect, and perhaps it is time we rethink our approach to such worlds. The assembly fell into a contemplative silence, each delegate reflecting on the implications of his words. This setback had not only forced them to reconsider Earth but to question the very foundation of their empire's approach to conquest. Their history was littered with victories achieved through overwhelming force, but now, facing a species that had defied all conventional expectations, they were beginning to see the limits of their methods. Back on Earth, the impact of the invasion had left an indelible mark on human society. The experience of confronting a technologically superior enemy had brought nations closer together, forging alliances and cooperation at unprecedented levels. While the physical scars of battle were visible in cities and landscapes, the psychological scars had transformed into a renewed sense of purpose. Humanity understood, perhaps for the first time, that they were not alone in the universe. The knowledge that an intergalactic empire had deemed them a threat elevated their perception of themselves, uniting them under a shared identity as Earth's defenders. The humans who had faced the aliens were not content to return to life as usual. Scientists, engineers, and leaders across the globe began a movement to study and reverse engineer any remnants of alien technology left behind, seeking to prepare for any future conflicts. Rather than shrinking from the encounter, humanity was moving forward, determined to close the gap between themselves and the species that had invaded their world. They had seen the face of the galaxy and were now intent on standing as equals, refusing to remain passive. In the assembly, as news of humanity's advancement trickled in, a mix of respect and wariness settled over the delegates. Earth's inhabitants had become a symbol of resilience within the Empire, a story retold in hushed tones as a reminder that even the most seemingly primitive worlds could harbor strength beyond what technology alone could measure. The skeptical delegates' warnings echoed through their discussions, a constant reminder that their own arrogance had nearly led them into a costly defeat. For the skeptical delegate, Earth's story represented a turning point. He saw humanity not as a target but as a kindred spirit in their determination, their ability to evolve and thrive under pressure. In his private reflections, he pondered whether there might be a future where Earth and the Empire could coexist, perhaps even collaborate. But he also understood that such a future would only be possible if the Empire recognized the strength and autonomy of Earth's inhabitants, treating them not as subjects to be conquered but as equals deserving of respect. As the assembly formally decreed that Earth would remain untouched, there was a sense of relief mixed with an underlying trepidation. The Empire, so accustomed to expanding through sheer force, had been humbled. The story of Earth would circulate through the Empire, a legend of an indomitable species that had defied all odds, standing against one of the most formidable powers in the galaxy, and emerging intact.